Hey math enthusiast, I'm here to go over the first part of the notes on volume. And we're going to start with the volume of prisms. Now for a rectangular prism, I'm given three dimensions: a length, a width, and a height. So in order to calculate the volume of my prism, all I'm going to have to do is multiply those three values together. So the volume of this prism would be 5, my length, times 3, my width, times 3, my height. So in that case, you can multiply all three together. You can do two numbers together at once if you'd like. Looks like I'm going to end up with 15. Multiply that by 3, which is going to give me 45. The units they were using were centimeters, and because this is volume, it's going to be cubed. And what this is telling me is that I have 45 individual cubes that make up this larger rectangular prism. And I can easily determine the total number of cubes by using that formula at the top. Now, for a triangular prism, when I want to calculate the volume, first I want to focus on figuring out what the base area of that triangle is. So if you recall, my formula for the area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. And it looks like they tell me that my base is 4 centimeters and my height is 7 centimeters. So it'd be 1/2 4 times 7. When I multiply those three together, we end up with 14, and in this case my units are centimeters squared because it's area. Now, in order to find the volume, I want to think about how many of these triangles am I going to stack on top of one another to get to the other end of my prism. In order to figure that out, I'm going to use the length. So my volume will be equal to the base area, which was 14, times the length, which is 12 centimeters, which gives me a total of 168. And once again, my units are centimeters, and now it's cubed because it's volume. Alright, now that we have our formulas, let's take a closer look at a couple of these examples. So for number 1, looks like we're dealing with a rectangular prism. So let's jot down our given information. So it looks like our length is 12 inches. Our width is 14 inches. And our height is 6 inches. So, according to my notes from earlier, in order to calculate the volume of a rectangular prism, it's going to be length times width times height. So we'll plug in our three values. In this case, we have 12 times 14 times 6. And when I multiply those three values together, I end up with 1008. And my units I'm using are inches cubed. So in this case, what I'm saying is that there are 1008 little cubes that make up this entire rectangular prism here. Now for number 2, it looks like we're dealing with a triangular prism. So let's start with what I'm given. I know my height is 8 centimeters. I know my length is 13 centimeters. And in this case, I'm not sure what my base is. So they just have it marked as A in my picture. So the first thing I have to do is solve for that value A. Now, in order to do that, let's just focus on this base triangle right here. And I'm going to redraw it off to the side. So in my right triangle, my height is 8, my base is A, and this third side, the hypotenuse, is that 17, that other value they give me in my original picture. So I have a right triangle, I'm given two sides, I'm looking for the third, so what I'm going to use is the Pythagorean theorem. So if you remember, it's going to be a leg squared plus a leg squared is going to be equal to the hypotenuse squared. So we'll go back and we'll fill in our actual lengths. So my two legs would be 8 and A. And in this case, my hypotenuse is going to be 17. So after I square my terms, we end up with 64, 289, and I end up with A squared equals 225. So it looks like A, after I take the square root, is going to be 15. So I can go back to my original picture, and now I know my base is actually 15. Now I should be able to calculate my volume. So in order to calculate the volume, first thing I'm going to need is the area of the base. Remember, that's going to be 1/2 base times height. Now I can fill in those values. My base, which I just found, was 15. My height, which is 8. So it looks like the area of my base is going to be 60 centimeters squared. Now, in order to calculate my volume, if you remember, it's the area of the base times the length. So it's going to be 60 centimeters squared times my length, which in this case is 13 centimeters, which gives me a volume of 780 centimeters cubed. Now, for this third example, we're worried about finding the volume of a box, or in other words, a rectangular prism. So let's start off with a little picture. And now let's fill in the information that I'm given. So they tell me we have a height of 6 inches. We have a width of 5 inches. And I have a length of 10 inches. Now, this picture is pretty much just like the one we have in example 1 and from our notes. So once again, I'm trying to calculate the volume, which is going to be length times width times height. So from here, I can just plug in my given information. The length they told me was 10 inches. My width, I was told, is 5 inches. And my height, I was told, is 6 inches. So I'm just multiplying those three values together, which gives me a final volume of 300 inches cubed.